from Pfizer that says they are literally producing millions of doses. Okay, so they have the supply. And they have also said that there have been so many that there have been doses left on the shelf. Now, one of the problems with the Pfizer and with the Moderna, not problems, but one of the challenges with both of these vaccines is that they need special handling. They need to be frozen at a certain temperature or they're ineffective. So if they're not used right away, then they're kind of useless as vaccines. But it's not that Pfizer doesn't have enough and therefore we're getting less. I think what is happening is more at the state level, that there have been blockages in distribution for one reason or another. And I know I have relatives in Texas, and they say they haven't had any problem getting the first dose, and I don't think there will be problems getting the second dose. I have a feeling that there are states in which there is a problem in distribution at the state level, not at the federal level. To me, and I'm speaking from a what can I say? I'm looking at it from a logistical perspective. It doesn't make any sense to me that if you're producing that many doses, what would the federal government be doing with it? Why would they waste that kind of supply? They have to distribute it unless there's there's a cog in the wheel. This is a new process, first of all, right? Vaccine distribution. We've never had something of this scale to deal with. So there's going to be glitches along the way in how we deliver things. That cannot be laid at the federal government's door or at Trump's door. Sometimes you need enough vaccinators to give the vaccines.
But do you think? Uh,
Go ahead,
go
please.
ahead. Go ahead. Do you think the fact that we waited so long to take this disease seriously might also have something to do with the reason why we're now in this bottleneck?
You know, it's always hard to know how to take something that we've never seen before seriously. I mean, look at the flu. The flu is something we don't think about anymore, right? But it does kill quite a few people every year. Even though we have vaccines given every year, there is a death toll from the flu every single year. There
Yes.
was no reason for us to believe that COVID was going to be any more lethal. It is lethal, first of all, to people who have comorbidities, right? That I will guarantee. That's the first thing that they look at. So that's why people who are older and they have other health-related conditions are more at risk. Younger people, children, they are not at risk because they typically have stronger immune systems. So I think what the federal government, what Trump was trying to do was to avoid a whole-scale panic, saying, let's wait, let's research this, let's use the usual infectious disease precautions. Socially distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, don't get together in large groups, the same thing that we would do for any contagious disease.
But he still doesn't wear a mask. He still doesn't mandate wearing masks. And he still holds large gatherings where there's no social distancing or masks required.
Okay. So as far as mandating a mask, I have always understood that that is not within the province of the federal government. So health policy is a state policy. So state to state to state, they can decide, or county or city, they can decide whether or not to make masks mandatory. At the federal level, they cannot.
Right. They can request.
They can request, but they cannot make it mandatory.
So,
And
so don't you think he should have led by example?
um, that's one way of looking at it. And the other way of looking at it is if you think that it's really something that is vicious, contagious, and might affect your health, you don't have to wait for somebody to tell you what to do. You do it for yourself, you do it for the people you love, you do it for the public, just as you take personal accountability. He may not have personal accountability, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. each individual can think for themselves and say, hey, listen, if I think this disease is going to be deadly and it's going to spread quickly and all of that, let me wear a mask. Let me inconvenience myself for a while until we have a handle on this thing. I mean, from the early days, there was so much contradictory evidence on how to deal with this virus. And even among the medical community, and most of the medical community says now, hey, listen, the cases that are most extreme are the ones where the immune system kind of whacks out. You know, that's not the rule, that's the exception. Or the people who are much older, have weakened immune systems, so on and so forth. The vast majority of the population will recover. So it's not something that they felt was worthy of that level of paranoia. And I don't think Trump felt it either. He was trying to calm the country down, because if you imagine, if he came out and he said, listen, this is a deadly disease, it's going to kill millions of people, what would the public have done?
The same thing that we did with AIDS and Ebola.
Well, see, with Ebola, they kind of knew the method of transmission, that you had to have close contact with patients who had Ebola. So that's why mostly the doctors and the nurses who were treating Ebola patients came down with them. But it was not otherwise transmissible. So it was a disease with a different time frame. And yes, for AIDS, a lot of people did not know how the disease was transmitted. They thought it was a gay disease. They didn't know the method of transmission. So of course they panicked. And I saw that. I mean, the case of Ryan White, for example. Typical example, as people got more educated, I think they learned to assess things a little bit better. So you need to educate the public. And this is a virus that we had no background for. It takes a while. And I think also that we were getting the if you don't trust the president, I would go straight to a health organization. They're the ones that are dealing with epidemics and contagious diseases. They should have been the one to set the policy. They didn't give us clear guidelines, not the WHO. CDC kept flipping back and forth. So it's unrealistic of you to go to a president who has no medical experience, is not in the healthcare field, and say, oh, well, he should have told us this or he should have told us that. You treat him just like anybody else who doesn't know any better.
but
That's just
that's
how
not.
I.
But that's not what he said in his speeches, though. I mean, this is a president his slogan was, he knew more. I know more than the doctors. I know more than anyone. I mean, that's kind of what he ran on. But Nick, I see you here. Nick, we're talking about the vaccines and the stockpile of uh, that's supposedly not there. And this is reported by both sides, not just one. Uh,
Yep,
what do you think? How do you think? That
I'm here.
45 and the people
You just
response.
can't say his name, can you? He's still President Trump for another 3 days.
Right. He's
He's
he's still the 40. He's still the 45th president for the next 3 days. Yeah. I I
so
couldn't say I couldn't say his name in 1982, so nothing's changed. Go ahead.
uh, so Trump gets all the blame, none of the credit, and it's so easy. It's always easy to pass blame and be a critic, then stick your neck out, have a plan, and take the lead. So Trump certainly did more than nothing. And he was thwarted at every step of the way, because there's no way that Democrats would allow Trump to succeed in anything, especially the coronavirus. Coronavirus was the Democrats' best hope to win back the executive. They had very little hope in January of 2020. They were focused on impeachment. And when Trump brought up coronavirus as a posing threat, seeing what was happening in China, what did the Democrats do? They didn't take it seriously. They ridiculed him for using impeachment as a distraction. And everything I am saying, I can substantiate with video evidence of the actual people saying the things. So you can't discount the fact that the same politicians who abruptly switched, and it's always right on cue, they always have the same talking points in the same position, and it always flips right on script. They, back in January and February, were ridiculing Trump for distracting from impeachment. And instead of taking it seriously, like they all claim to now, they were telling their constituents, like Nancy Pelosi in California during Lunar New Year, I'm out here. There's nothing to worry about. Don't be racist. Trump is blaming China. He's making this racist because Trump, of course, is a racist. And in New
I
York,
agree with
what
you
is
there.
Cuomo? Yeah.
I agree with you there. We have no argument there.
Okay. So next, and let me take a pause here. Since you're asking me a question, let's go one and one. Tell me which
No, 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 no,
state.
no, 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 no,
Uh,
no, 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 no.
yeah.
I'm trying to get the conservative point of view. We already know
Well,
my views. We know that I'm a
no,
liberal.
no, because I think
We know
I want to know.
that I despise everything
I
that
know, but you
represents
can't. But
Trump. So I'm trying to
being
find
against,
out
right?
what makes you a conservative and
Oh,
why
absolutely.
I should think about doing something different. Now, wait a minute, hold it
Mhm.
now. So let's. I will kind of make it one on one because I want you to go back to your military background here, okay? And let's talk about the events in the Capitol, okay? We have a young lady, Ashley
So we're
Babbitt.
already jumping topics, though. I thought we were on COVID still.
Well, but you want to ask me questions about COVID, and I want to ask you questions about your
Right. Well, I
conservative
just want to
point of
ask
view.
you one question. I mean, that should be
Okay,
fair, right? You should
okay,
let me ask
okay,
you a question. It's not a
okay,
gotcha
yeah,
question.
okay. Go ahead, go ahead.
So,
I'll let you. Go ahead.
all right. So we seem to know what doesn't work. We have plenty of examples of what doesn't work. Can you tell me which state? There's plenty of Democrat-run states. So just any state in the union, which state did it right, so we can model their behavior next time?
Which state? Actually, I don't see too many states, whether they were right or left, that did anything right because everybody mistrusted each other and no one had a uniform plan. Every state decided to do what it wanted to do when it wasn't that wasn't what we should have done.
And it
We
can't.
No, that's. But there's advantages to that. Is that we have these laboratories of democracy, and we can see, based on a non-uniform approach, which states did things differently, and of those different approaches, which ones were effective. So Florida, Texas, they've had their schools open far more than California and New York have. So many, almost all their schools have been
and
open.
pe-
Some of them closed
and
temporarily. Yeah, yeah.
people are dying in Florida.
Correct. They're dying everywhere, but are they dying more because the schools have been open? Is that a fair question? Is the death rate higher than the states that shut down?
Is that an excuse because we have fewer deaths, then it's okay? That doesn't. I mean, that's
No,
like. I mean,
that's going from. Well,
hold
that's not
hold
the
hold.
argument. All right.
Hold. When you go into battle, you expect a certain number of casualties. If you have more casualties, the general or whoever set up that strategy is usually fired. The one that comes up with the less number of casualties is usually promoted. Isn't that we have 400,000 Americans dead? Should
Okay.
we glorify the job that the Trump administration did? Remember, you had the majority in Congress. You set up all of the rules for the last 4 years. You, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, uh, 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 pedophile Jordan. I mean, you had all of the cards, and you dealt them out accordingly. So how can you blame Democrats when Democrats were the minority? Go
James,
ahead.
I think in this case, what we're trying to do is analyze which factors right? Which of the factors are most responsible for the spread of this disease? Now, if you're looking at school closures, right, and you say, okay, if we close down all the schools, that should reduce the number of cases, right? We're talking about cases of exposure, not everyone who's exposed ends up as a mortality, so to speak.
Right, right.
That would be a solution. But you're saying that yes, schools are open in Florida and people are still dying. So obviously that cannot be a factor. That
No,
cannot.
I'm not saying that it cannot be a factor. What I'm saying is that it doesn't seem to be a major factor. The fact that we send kids back to school hasn't decreased the number of deaths. It, and now we found out that there are some kids that can even be susceptible.
That's
So I don't think that that's a good yardstick. You know, I mean, aren't shouldn't we be more aligned to stop the disease than to worry so much about what was the cause and effect? Right now, we still have the same amount of Americans dying every day as we did in 9/11. Doesn't that cause some concern?
but the point. What you're trying to say is, oh, we have to have 100% success rate in
No,
con-
no, 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 no. I'm not saying because the vaccine is only 90% effective itself. So I'm not saying that we have to have 100%, but I'm saying that we should be flattening that curve that we were talking about back in March and February and April.
But what we saw is that by closing down businesses, by making people stay at home, quarantine, they were okay, fine. They were not spreading the disease as long as they were not congregating with each other. Yes?
Yes,
Because it's a contagious disease and it spreads through contact. Right?
yes.
So is that the solution to trap them in their homes and say you cannot go to work, you cannot go to school, you cannot meet your friends because this disease will spread easily? Is that a better solution? It has other consequences. Right? That it seems like that would be the only way to completely eliminate this virus. And the problem is all it does is it made the virus stay dormant. As long as we were following those rules, cases dropped. Yes?
Okay. Okay. How do you feel about the 100-day mandate
Wait,
from
hold on.
Biden?
But James, I've been waiting patiently, and keep this in mind
Go
that I
ahead.
am not interrupting you when you're talking. So when you interrupt me, I'm going to bring
Go
this
ahead.
back up. Uh, what I was trying to ask you about was an example of a state that got it right, because you said so many different states had so many different approaches. So of all those different approaches, which ones are the ones that worked, since we didn't have a uniform approach?
I, for me personally, I would say New York.
Okay, so New York has still the highest death count. It's California is approaching it, but no state has a higher death count than New York. So how is that a success?
Well, first
That
of
should be
all,
a
because
failure in my book.
okay, then who? Well, now see, we're getting into a discussion now. So, point to a conservative. I know you're going to use a conservative state. So, point to
Well, I
a
can,
conservative
let
state.
me, but you answer. I'll answer after that. But it's your turn to answer. Give
Well,
me an
I
example.
still
If New York is your state, that
New,
seems
New,
odd because they have
New,
the highest death.
yes, but also you have to remember, New York also has 3 airports. It also has the Port of New York. You also have to remember how many entrances there are to New York, just as here in
Okay.
California. So, this is one of the reasons why we had one strain on the East Coast and a different
Yeah.
strain out here on the West Coast. And nobody wanted to say, well, they're two different strains. They tried to make them all the same.
But
For
what
the
did
wo-
they? What did
for,
New
for
York do
women,
that was successful? That should be modeled by the other states during this pandemic or the next one?
they shut down. They shut down the center of the spread. They shut down New York City. Now I
Interesting.
understand. I understand. There were some consequences for that, but when you consider the amount of cases that were in New York at that particular time, I think that we would have the cases or the number of cases might have tripled had New York not taken the actions that they taken. And then, I mean, once again, we can, spread, blame back to the government, PPs and all that. But no, as far as the way that I thought that it should be handled, uh, just like out here in California, how we have, uh, I guess we're in purple now, where we have very few businesses operating. I think that this is something that needs to be done, unless you're going to try to uh, put a certain amount of the population at a higher risk than others.
Interesting. Okay, so then it shows that the death count really doesn't matter because you cited a state that has the highest death count in the country, but you still think that they did a great job. You brought up New York as an example of the state that you think did the best job and should be modeled. So that
Be,
shows that
before
yeah,
before the vaccine was
yeah,
available, yes, before the vaccine, and as I pointed out,
right.
just the amount of traffic in and out of New York City. Do you think that? I mean, what if we had three times the amount of deaths that than we have
But by
now?
that standard, then there's no way to fault any Republican state because you could always say whatever the number is, at least it's not three times higher.
Okay, but
Same
we're
with the
talking.
whole country. Under Trump, there's 400,000 deaths, but at least there's not three times that amount.
At
There's
least
1.2
you're right.
million.
You're right.
Yeah.
At least there's not 300 million. But I'm also saying that there could have been less had he reacted much sooner. That's what I'm
And
saying.
that's what I'm getting at. So tell me the strategies that have worked, for example, in New York that we should have
See,
done.
see, 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 see.
Yeah,
Once again, you want to
yeah.
turn this into a discussion about me. I'm asking you
No,
about a
no, this isn't about
conserv.
you. This is
I'm asking
it,
you about a
it,
conservative point of view.
exactly. And what I'm doing by asking you about it is
You're
helping
taking
you
up
recognize
you're
that it's
taking up you're taking up a lot of your time and Christine's time that could be
well
used
because
more
it's a false
peacefully.
it's a false equivalence when people say that it's Trump's fault. Trump mishandled the virus. End quote. As we watch on CNN, they tell us to say that it's a complete
Fox
fallacy to
News
think
said it.
that
Fox News said it, not just CNN.
exactly they all Fox News is basically CNN light at this point. I don't watch Fox News. I never did, but it's even worse than it used to be. So no, that's not a place to get. You and I can agree on one thing that Fox News sucks, but that's about all we
Christina,
agree on. But
Christina,
okay, I'll just end it with this one point: is that it's very easy to criticize President Trump by looking how bad things are, because it's always easier to complain than to provide a constructive solution. And when I asked you for a state that we can model our approach after, you cited the state that had literally the highest death count. So we should go by New York. And next time when we have a pandemic, we will do what New York did. We will send the infected patients into the nursing homes, which comprise over half of all deaths in New York, much higher than that. It exploded the number of deaths. And meanwhile, you're telling people to gather for Lunar New Year. You're keeping the subway open despite urgent demands by health experts not to. De Blasio and all of those demands and said he wasn't shutting down the subways until he was forced to. And let's do that. Let's follow their approach. Let's keep everything open despite urges not to. So now you're adopting an approach similar to a lot of the Republican governors, and maybe we agree on that as well.
okay, all right. Well, let's get into uh, Ashley Babbitt here,
Stop
Nick,
it.
because
Sure.
you're a veteran,
Yep.
okay? Just like I was. Now,
Yep.
uh,
Go on.
I don't know exactly what your MOS was, but my expectations were if you were the first one through the door, then you had to expect certain consequences.
Right.
That's the reason why they that's considered in some cases a mark of valor being the first one through the door. But in this
Yep.
case, you're a mob. You're attacking uh, the Senate House. You're there's a Secret Service officer or some type of officer directly pointing a gun at you from less than 30 feet away. Do you think that the people that helped her through the door are complicit in her death? And do you think that President, excuse me, I can't,
Finally!
I
Oh, the
can't,
Freudian
I
slip.
can't say,
But
I can't
it took you until almost the end of his 4th year to finally address him as such.
uh, incited the riot that caused this woman's death.
All right, Chris, you want me to take it first?
No, yeah, I want you to take it first because you're a soldier. I want you to
Yeah,
take it
I
first.
think
The
I'm a soldier.
expectations of breaching the door.
Sure. So, what I think it was a Capitol Police officer who shot Ashley Babbitt did was necessary for 2 reasons. He didn't know how many more people would be coming through that door. He had to provide a hard target. He had to make the Senate chamber or the House chamber, whatever they're breaching into, a hard target. And the way to do that is through lethal.
Is through what?
Lethal force. I heard that much.
Lethal force. Okay, I think his connection must have gone off.
Yeah. Go ahead and
Oh,
interject
brother.
it.
Yeah.
You're back, Nick.
He's back.
Yeah. So I'm keeping the camera off the same safe bandwidth. I should be able to hear me there. So yeah, you're allowed to use lethal force in self-defense and defense of others, and that was a mob that had the opportunity, capability, and intent to inflict lethal harm on the House chamber and the occupants inside. So what he did was send a message to all of those behind her, and just by a matter of timing and luck, was Ashley Babbitt the one that died first, and not her black counterpart, who was a Black Lives Matter activist, Mr. Sanford. So that would have been absolute, as terrible as it was with Ashley Babbitt, it would have looked like a racially motivated shooting if the first one shot was one of the only black individuals there. I mean, there were plenty there, but there were definitely more white people than black. And what that would have looked like would have been a feast for the media. It would have been the best thing that they could have hoped for. Another black person that makes the headlines to show that officers target black people. No, that showed they were targeting whoever the threat was, regardless of their color. And because he was helping her, and there's video to show this, he was helping her get through the window. The officer who killed her did so in a justified manner, and he should be completely exonerated. The individual who was her accomplice, the Black Lives Matter activist, who I think you know what I'm talking about, he was well known. He was also sympathetic to Antifa. Anyways, yeah, he certainly assisted her, but ultimately, and I think Chris would agree with this, it was out of her own volition that she decided to do 2 things. Walk into the Capitol, even though the police pulled aside the barrier for her. Capitol Police basically allowed them all in, which never should have happened. And then she committed vandalism, and she was using unauthorized force to get into an area where she was unauthorized. So all less lethal means had been used. They had failed, and the officer had no options remaining. He did the right thing, in my opinion.
I agree with that, because I think both of you are in the military, right? Or have had military experience. I'm a civilian in that sense, but I'm looking at it from the perspective of a police officer that goes out on call every single day. What is the police officer's job? To make the citizens safe, or to promote the law. So if the Capitol police officer has seen a threat coming, they have to respond to the threat. They can't just sit there. I mean, they don't know what's coming. They have to respond. They have to do their job. And the person who assisted Ashley Ashley Babbitt, it's a mob. I don't think he meant to send her to her death, but she had personal accountability for being where she was, knowing that that was a risk she was taking. She's become a martyr for the cause. And her background is such that she was so radicalized. She thought she was doing it for the common good. And I think she herself should bear the blame for her death.
And the second part of that, do you feel that the people that gave the speeches, Nick Giuliani, Kushner, and the president himself, actually incited those people to riot? Do you think that they bear any responsibility for what happened at the Capitol January 6th?
Are you asking me or are you asking Nick?
No, I'm asking you first.
Okay. Anything can be fighting words, right? It doesn't take much. If I'm in the mood to see offense, I'm going to fight you for it. Or if I'm the kind of person that says, yeah, you can go ahead, you can say whatever you want about me, you can say whatever you want about XY, I'm not going to get triggered. Nothing you can say is going to make me violent at all. So, I don't think that they incited it. The rioters, the insurrectionists, they acted on their own emotions. That's really what I feel.
You feel the same way? You feel the same way, Nick?
I think his connection went off again. Again, it's as Nick probably would say, it's easy to blame X, Y, and Z for inciting rebellion or inciting disconnection or conflict or any of those things, but it takes two to tango, right? So we cannot have an argument unless both of us are fighting each other. If one person doesn't choose to argue, there's no conflict, there's no argument, and they walk away. But the rioters already had a grievance going. They really felt that they had been misunderstood, mistreated, they were angry. So it took very little to inflame them. And they acted on that, the least or whatever provocation they felt. Here's someone who at least supports our point of view. They understand us. They believe in us. They're fighting for what we're fighting for. Sure. It motivates us. It's positive reinforcement in a negative way, but it's still positive reinforcement.
Okay. In 2016, when I went to bed that day, I believe in the first early going hours that
election night you're talking about.
Yes. And I actually believe that Hillary was ahead when I went to sleep.
So did most of us. I did too.
When I woke up, however, Donald Trump had actually lost the election by 3 million votes, but he won the Electoral College. And liberals like myself were told, hey, this is the way it is. If you don't like it, move. Go to Mexico, go wherever you want. Donald Trump's, the guy now, and you have to accept it. All right. When I go to sleep about 3 o'clock in the morning, in certain states, Donald Trump is ahead. When I wake up the next morning, after most of the districts that are predominantly of color, minority districts, have turned in their votes, they have overwhelmingly voted for Biden. For Biden, they have scorned the president that has done more for us than Lincoln. Do you believe that this election was stolen from Donald Trump?
Stolen is a very, I wouldn't go that far, but I think there's a critical difference between the 2016 election and the 2020 election. I think you know what that is as well, right? It's the
Race?
mail-in.
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we hear you now, Nick.
Okay, cool.
To me,
Oh.
to me, it was race. Okay, so you think in your opinion, it was the mail-in ballot. So
Yes,
uh,
because John,
uh,
my reading, he had more of a following among African Americans, among the Hispanics, than anybody expected him to have in the 2020 election. Nick, am I correct about that?
expected him to have. I would definitely, I will agree with that phrase. Expected him to have. I will agree with that.
So he did. He did have more support among the minority voters. But the critical difference between the two elections. What happened?
Especially when he beat precincts, he beat Democrats.
We can't hear you, Nick.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this app. It's been up, but yeah, he did. He improved over 2016, and yeah, there was a whole movement called the Blexit, Black Exit from the Democrat Party that started from 2016 onwards, and look at the popularity it gained. As much as CNN, New York Times tried to suppress it and ridicule those who were behind it as sellouts.
I've had black conservatives on here, Nick, in 2000.
Yeah, I know, and I respect you for doing that.
In 2000,
about being called Uncle Tom's.
Well, that's I call. I mean, if you come on this show and I feel that you're one, I will call you one. That's just like I was referring to the Uncle Ben phrase earlier. But anyway, what in 2016, approximately, I think it was 8% of black men voted for Trump. In 2020, it was, I think, 18%. However, the percentage of black women that voted for Trump during the same period, whereas I think it was 20% of black women voted for Trump in the first election, almost 60% of those voters voted for Biden.
So
there's a little difference in demographics there within the black and minorities. Just like Cubans. I mean, Cubans voted, are afforded a whole lot of different benefits than the average Latin American immigrant that comes to the United States. And I'm sure you know that.
Yeah. Well, why do you think a lot of the Cubans voted for Trump? In fact, the majority in many areas of Florida. Why do you think that was instead of voting for Democrats?
Because they are treated much differently than I said. Most people from Latin America. If a Cuban touches soil, he automatically becomes an American citizen. He gets a gold Social Security card, and he gets benefits. As all he has to do is touch soil.
Right, but if you're Hispanic,
ask any Mexican that swum across the border from Texas to Mexico if they got automatic citizenship or they got the gold Social Security card. Most of them got the children taken away. But
if they came here and had a kid, did their kid get full citizenship and all the benefits?
If you're Cuban,
if you have a child here, if you're Hispanic and you come here 8.5 months pregnant and you have a baby at the border and you go into an American hospital, what happens to your baby? Does he get full citizenship or is he sent back?
If you go into an American hospital, yes. If you get sent back and your baby's born on the other side of the border, then so be it. But that's not what we were talking about.
You're ignoring the main reason that when Cubans were polled, what they were giving as the main reason for why they were voting for Trump. Because why else would that explain the shift? Because the same reasons applied in 2016. What do you think was the difference for why Cubans came out in force and voted for Trump this time? It was,
They voted for Trump the last time. Look at the
No, but
look at the election notes. The
yeah,
Cuban population votes Republican. They are very conservative
uh-huh,
because of the fact that they come from a socialist background like Castro.
exactly,
So
exactly. And
so,
so
so we're
why do you
talking
think?
so we're getting away from what did the election get stolen from Trump and the conservatives? Yes or no? In your opinion?
Well, let's see here. The the number of coincidences. Let's not say it was stolen. Let's not say
No,
there
no,
was
no, no,
fraud.
no, no. No,
No, no,
no, we're not talking
no.
about coincidences. We're talking about
Well,
fact.
I'm being euphemistic.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
because we're not supposed to say that any of those terms, it was stolen or that there was fraud, right? All those terms will get you flagged. They might even get the show flagged if they're doing transcription. So I don't want to get you in trouble, but nobody has been able to answer some unresolved issues that were caught and dismissed, even by Republican governors who are certainly no fan of Trump. Now, namely, why were votes being deleted? Why did numerous counties in Georgia and Pennsylvania, and totaling over 400,000 in Pennsylvania, have negative votes? How does anybody explain negative votes for a candidate? And that was showing up numerous times and it's still through forensic investigations. They were following the number, they were auditing the counts, and there's no logical explanation for, in an incremental voting system, why votes would be deleted. And that all coincided with the fact that after November 3rd, after the evening of November 3rd, the votes suddenly shifted in numerous swing states, suddenly. And that all coincided with so many coincidences, right? That there was a water leak. So all the poll workers and watchers have to go home. Turns out it wasn't a water leak. It was a leaky toilet, but oops, human error. A poll worker in Georgia, a poll watcher who had all access to all the precincts, told that his pass didn't apply to that precinct. So even though it's on video and you can see him showing the pass, it says all precinct access. Oops, human error. We didn't mean to send him home. Sorry. How about when was that Georgia where they told the poll workers, we're done for tonight, come back tomorrow. So then as the poll workers left, the poll watchers left. And then what happens? They start counting. They denied it, that they denied that they were counting after the poll workers left. But what happened? Oh, it's surveillance video. Oh, so then they have a backup excuse. Oh, well, it was no different from how our normal count is. We didn't tell anybody to leave. And what happens? They pull out votes under the table, and that's another swing state that switches for Biden. They even caught votes that had to be reversed back for Trump through the investigations, through the audits. And that's why
128. 128 votes. Wow. That
no, no,
makes
no,
a
no,
big
no, no,
difference.
no, no. 6,000 was the one count, and then that was one that that they admitted was inadvertently switched
Okay.
to
Yeah.
Biden. How do votes switch like that?
It just seems remarkable that these are all the same excuses that we made for Trump getting elected in 2016. Now the
No,
conservatives
no, no,
want
no.
to
You
use,
didn't have.
wait, 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 wait,
All right,
wait, wait,
go
wait,
ahead.
wait. It seems now that the conservatives want to use the same, because remember, liberals, we screamed. It was stolen. It was stolen. I'm going to say it. It doesn't matter to me. If they want to cut off my liberty, whatever. But anyway, we screamed because I was
Yeah,
one of them. The
yeah.
election was stolen. How can you possibly win an election when you lose the popular vote? So now it seems like conservatives want to use that. Well, hey, it was in the dead of night. Well, hell, when I woke up in the morning and found out that Trump was president, hey, I was like, what the? I was sick for 3 days. How could this happen?
It's fine.
It must have,
Yeah.
it must have been. It had to be some type of rigging. Christina, we've kind of let you out of this conversation here, but what's your thoughts on that?
It's what I said in the beginning. You're trying to compare two different election scenarios, right? And that's what I tried to say. The mail-in ballots had a lot to do with that.
Okay. So you think it was more about mail-in ballots?
Because you cannot verify integrity of the voters when you have a bunch of ballots coming in from all over the place. You don't know whether the voter is alive, whether the voter is eligible to vote, who the voter is. Nothing. I mean, it's an imperfect system when you don't have the person standing right in front of you, giving you their ID card saying, yes, I'm a registered Republican or a registered Democrat for this election. There's a lot of room for error in things like that. So I think that was one of the fundamental causes. I also do think that if you don't, yes, Nick is right. After all the poll workers were going home, what happened? There was a long period of time where there's no security, there's no surveillance. There is opportunity for things to change there too. I will not say stolen, but I think there are too many things that mean that, and starting with the fact that from the beginning, from the time that Trump was elected, people had an animus against him. They wanted him out at any cost. So they would find any excuse to find fault with him to get him out. And this was a way they could do that. So I don't think that it was a fair election. I will not say stolen because that's a very strong word, but I don't think it was fair.
So what part of it was unfair or different than any other election that we've had since Bush? I mean,
Nick, are you there? Again, I already said so, right? What part of it is unfair? If you've got ballots for which you don't provide support, that the voter is the actual voter, there is huge margin for error. If you don't have the systems monitored, there is another proportion for error.
But there are states where you are not required to present ID when you give your ballot.
That's, again, it's the same thing as the mask controversy, right? You're not required to do anything, and yet you're puzzled when the number of COVID cases go up. It's something you do just to maintain integrity. Whether you're required or not, you say, hey, listen, this is a way that we make sure that the results are equal as far as we can, that there is no contention later on that you didn't do this right or you didn't do that right. If we went back to the 2016 election, I don't know what happened after the poll workers went home. I really don't. Did they shut down
There's key differences between this election and 2016. We didn't have mass mail-in voting. We have never done mass mail-in voting in California before. Tell me we have. Tell me we have, and I'll tell you that we've been doing absentee, which is different. So there was no reason.
And I see no difference between the absentee ballot that you probably sent in when you were on active duty. I see no difference between that mail-in ballot or absentee ballot than there was in the absentee ballot or the mail-in ballot that I submitted to the state.
Well, then let me explain the difference, because just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
But wait a minute, but let's talk experience here.
Hold on. I mean, let me answer that question. I know what you're doing, because it was what I was hoping you would say, is that we've been doing mail-in.
You got really bad connection, Nick.
Yeah, he did say there was going to be a bad connection.
Yeah, I know we've been doing mail-in ballots for the military since the Civil War.
No, we have not. No, we have not.
Go ahead.
So what people, and this is what you just did, you confused absentee with mail-in, and they're different.
No, you confused absentee with mail-in, because for the last 50 years that I've been voting, to me, I see no difference.
I
Either
understand
way,
you don't see a difference. I understand.
either way, I have to stick my ballot in a mailbox. Someone has to get it out of a post office, and
Right.
someone else has to count it.
I understand that you see no difference, but that doesn't mean you're correct. It just means you're ignoring the difference. So that doesn't make you right. That doesn't work in your favor.
Okay.
There's a difference. It's a huge difference. Mail-in ballots are sent out indiscriminately. They're sent out to every voter on the voter list. Absentee is requested. There was no reason why we couldn't have done mass absentee. So it cuts down on the fraud significantly. There will always be fraud in every election. In any human-run system, there will always be errors. But what it does do is reduces the amount of ineligible voters getting voted. How many people did you hear who were out of state, who hadn't lived in California in years, received ballots to their address? That wouldn't happen if you were requesting it being sent to a California address. It would be illegal, it'd be fraudulent, and it has happened. They've already caught over a dozen people with
a dozen.
Oh no, I'm saying no. I mean, these are people that have been caught already. This is just
yeah.
It was
You're talking about a
November.
dozen. You're talking about a dozen out of how many people voted?
I'm talking about California.
Yes.
Thousands of ballots. Another lady they just caught, Hispanic lady who was bribing voters. They caught her. One of the charges that she was using gifts and bribes for votes. So there's numerous opportunities for fraud. And then with ballot harvesting, you can go. It's illegal in many states. It's illegal in many states, right? But in
ballot
California,
harvesting.
yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Nick.
There is precedent. There is precedent. It has happened before.
Yes, it has. That's. I mean, Christine, you said that there were things that were unfair. You also pointed to mail-in voting. Do you think that things would have been different without the COVID-19 being in play?
A lot of things would have been different without COVID-19. A lot of things. It definitely threw a wrench into so many systems, so many processes.
Hey James, let me ask you? Tell me just one way that Democrats were harmed by COVID. One way that COVID affected Democrats adversely. Just give me one example.
The ability not to be able to pay your bills and to put food on the table.
No, I mean the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party.
The Democratic Party. The fact that the Republicans, that the conservatives have committed themselves to the far right left extreme. The fact that race relationships in
you're dancing around the question. Just give me one example of how the Democrat Party has been harmed by COVID. Harmed by COVID. Give me one example.
Has been harmed by COVID?
Yes, because I can give you 30 reasons why they've been boosted by COVID, why what they would want this to continue on, why it strengthened them. But give me one example of how they were harmed by it, why they would want this to go away.
Wait a minute. In other words, you're saying that the Democrats are using the corpses of dead Americans in order to further their agenda.
Well, that's an oversimplification. The answer to that is no. But are you going to tell me? And hold on, I want you to answer that question before I answer it. You can't just keep turning it back on me.
No,
so,
the Democrats have taken every advantage necessary of COVID. They have not, in this case, they have not been harmed by COVID except for the harm that it has done their constituents. The Democratic Party has not been harmed by COVID itself. The only reason why the Republican and the conservative side have been harmed is because they did not recognize the seriousness of the pandemic. And if they had kept up their economic advantages, if they had kept up with their normal agenda without the spread of COVID, then it would be very likely that we would be seeing a second term of 45. We would be having 45 and 46. No, the Democrats have actually gained an advantage to me by COVID-19.
Okay, I agree, and that's very fair of you to answer that, because it's hard for me to think that the Democrats, like Governor Newsom, for example, want this to end anytime soon. They have unprecedented powers because it's an emergency. They're looking really good on getting a bailout for financial woes that existed years before COVID was ever even a discussion. And this is going to be exactly what they needed. They have a pension crisis, just like in New York, just like in Illinois, just like in numerous Democrat states. So the worse they can make this, the more businesses they can keep closed, the more financial devastation they can show to their state, the greater the likelihood this Democrat-led Congress will authorize bailouts at the expense of the responsible other states that are red and blue. And they will, just like the taxpayers, be penalized for the irresponsibility of the irresponsible counterparts. And they also have been able to push radical agendas that never would have been allowed in a non-COVID environment. They've been trying to get increased rent control, and they finally got it. I mean, anybody who thinks that this is a fair deal for landlords right now has no idea what the law actually says, where it's a state mandated 75% rental discount on the tenant's rent, but the landlord has to maintain all of the expenses and upkeep with no discount for them. So these are policies that the radical left has been thirsting for years. And now that they have COVID, it's the magic panacea. Not to mention these politicians who have no incentive to get back to work. Why would they want any of this to end early? Why would some of these public school teachers want this to end? I'm not saying all of them think like this, but you're going to tell me some of these teachers who are getting their regular paychecks, and I'm not talking about all of them, I'm talking about those who are getting paid their regular paychecks and don't even have to go into school. You think they want this to end anytime soon? Just like these politicians? What's their incentive to make this end? Now that they got Trump out, maybe they will recognize that it's time to use the vaccine that was developed under Trump, for which he gets no credit, only blame, and make this thing disappear. But when we blame Trump and say the Republicans and Trump mishandled the virus without no obvious solution as to what would have worked, there's no solution that you've proposed that, had the Republicans done that, we wouldn't have been in the predicament we're in right now. It's not masks, it's not social distancing, it's not quarantines, because you have plenty of examples of states that have done all those things and have done no better, in fact, many times far worse than the states who haven't. So what else is there to do?
Christine, I want to thank you and Nick for coming on the show. My next guest is on. We got a little extra time because one of our guests wasn't able to make it tonight. So, Christine, I'm going to let you give us your final word on events coming or upcoming.
My final word. All I honestly hope Biden follows through on its promise, is able to unify the country, is able to bring them some healing and some recovery so that the economy goes on strong. I'm skeptical, but if that is the promise that he makes, yes, let him have his honeymoon period. Because one of the things that happened, he never got that chance. He never got that chance. And now Biden, so let's see what he does.
Well, I want to invite you and Nick back after Biden's first 14 days, and we'll let you critique him. How's that?
Yeah. If
All right, Nick.
I don't think Biden will still be president in that long, but we'll see. Hopefully he lasts at least until then, because I have a $500 bet that Biden will not be president by December 31st, 2021. It will be President Harris. So we'll see. We'll see if I'm right. Anybody want to take me up on that bet? You have a chance to win $500.
All right, man. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you in 14 days. Might take you up
Okay.
on that. You know, I would say at least until 2022, but we'll
Oh,
see.
you are an optimistic man.
All right, Nick.
All right,
Christine,
James.
thank you so much. You guys have a
Take care.
great night.
Thank you,
Yeah.
James.
You too.
Uh, good evening, Larry. How are you doing? Unmute yourself. You're muted right now.
Thank you. Thank
There
you
you
very
go.
much.
There
Yeah,
you go.
you can hear me okay now, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. First of all, glad to see that you've made it through another year with us here. This is first time that we've got together for 2021. Don't know if we were streaming the last time. I think we were just
No,
doing.
this is the first time I've been able to join you face to face, so to speak.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's a little different now. I kind of like the intimacy of the whole thing. But I brought you on not only because you were a Vietnam vet, but also because of the fact that we're in that same age group here. And, COVID is still here. We've got a couple of vaccines now. And, people, there's even controversy over that now. So, you know, uh, we're going to talk about that as we get along into the show. But let's start with the events of this week. We saw a mob assaulting the Capitol building. We see there's increased security in the state capitals and even for the inauguration. A fire at a homeless camp caused, people to be evacuated today. So, I mean, we're definitely on high alert. They're vetting the National Guard. Uh, what is your concern about the increase of the right wing extremists?
Well, I think we saw, all of these things I think can be laid directly at the feet of 45. He kicked off his campaign in 2015, lashing out against Mexican and Central American immigrants. And during the campaign, he used many dog whistles to the white supremacists, which may have sparked the Nazi clashes in Charleston. He said there were good people on both sides. Of course, he's been cheering on. He's been cheered on by the right-wing TV networks and the radio talk shows. The naive and misinformed, seeking approval from authority figures, are more likely to be emboldened to act on their biases and prejudices. And I firmly believe that the military must do a lot of house cleaning to rid its ranks of anyone who displays any racist or bigoted tendencies. Unfortunately, the military is an authoritarian structure. It's not a democracy. However, they do emphasize teamwork. So it will be a challenge to get service members to understand that their duty consists always to be in service to the Constitution of the United States, the supreme law of the land, from which all other laws flow. And the military must clearly understand, all up and down the chain of command, that no unlawful order should ever be complied with. This means that military members must be educated and bright enough to recognize an unlawful directive when they see or hear it. Just like there is zero tolerance for substance abuse, we have to have zero tolerance for racism and authoritarianism and fascism in the military. Those are just the first thoughts that come to my mind about that issue. And I think those things have not been emphasized enough through our society or through our organized institutions such as the military. And if we can't get military people trained to think right, then I don't know if there's much hope for the future for any of us.
Look, when we talked earlier about Ashley Babbitt, the veteran, she was shot down by Capitol Police or some type of security. Uh, we also saw uh, another gentleman that was supposedly of rank, a lieutenant colonel in the National Guard. Although he did seem to be, rather calm and rather, respectful of the surroundings, he was still a part of that mob. You see, now we have heard of numerous military personnel that have been engaged in this type of rhetoric and this type of the breach of military, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. If you really want to be, right to the point about it, uh, it says a lot there about enemies, foreign and domestic. Uh, as I'm just, I put up something on my page the other day where it was a recent veteran, saying, do you realize how some of these young soldiers must feel knowing that the people that they're armed against are their fellow Americans? I kind of go back to the Vietnam War, man, where we also had the Republic, calling us baby killers, misunderstanding our missions, but yet and still uh, making judgments. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you that the people need to understand how our society is supposed to work. Now we've had instances in the military, what they call green on green assaults and so forth. So every now and then you're going to have somebody pop up that doesn't belong in the ranks, and then something's going to have to be done about them. But I just think we need a much tougher screening system to not let them get in the ranks in the first place. And if they have if they do get into the ranks, then we need to make sure that they are disabused of any erroneous type of thinking. I was thinking about this Ashley Babbitt, and I'm sure that she thought somehow or was misled and misguided. And I don't blame a lot of these people for being misinformed, because we've got a whole news network that runs 24/7 with propaganda and misinformation. Plus the social media, are full of misinformation, and people may be frustrated, and they're easily talked into or converted or radicalized by some of this rhetoric that they encounter. And I think that in normal social situations, if somebody starts popping off about things that in a way that's completely socially unacceptable, that person is immediately ostracized and shunned, and so they learn real quick, like that kind of thinking is out of line and is not going to get them far within that group. And I don't know. I think the problem with today is we have all these information silos that people live in, and they don't hear any countervailing voices, and so they just run around with these false perspectives and don't understand the truth about the way things really work. Like I heard somebody was in the Capitol saying, talking to a Capitol police officer, saying, we're here on behalf of your boss, not understanding that Capitol police officer worked for the legislative branch of government and not for the executive branch of government. And this is something every American needs to understand. In fact, every person who is an immigrant that comes into the United States and wants to become a citizen, one of the things they have to figure out real quick in order to pass the citizenship test are the three branches of government and how they work and how they're different and how they're co-equal in authority according to the Constitution. Well, now here this rioter was. I don't know what his background was or whether he should have known any better, but thinking that somehow that Capitol policeman worked for Trump. And well, that's absurd. That shows you how ignorant so many people are, that they don't understand the facts. And that's the reason they go off and do half-cocked and half-baked things, because they're not well informed. That's just my reaction to what I think I heard your question to be.
Speaking of Ashley Babbitt, from a law enforcement point of view, were those people complicit in her death that helped her through the window?
Well, I don't think I kind of try to analogize this to a bank robbery. If two people go into a bank to rob it, and they rob it together, and on the way out of the bank, one of the guards shoots one of the robbers. Well, I don't think the other robber is responsible for that other robber's death.
But he's charged with murder, though.
The robber who was the friend of the other robber who got killed is charged with murder?
He's charged with murder because the guard had to use deadly force in order to stop the robbery. So he's complicit in that murder. Well,
you're probably more familiar with the law than I am then. I didn't know it worked that way. Of course, obviously, anytime you're involved in any kind of conspiracy that results in someone else's death, then you do become culpable for that death. And so maybe that's the legal theory that they're using in that case then.
Well, no, the reason why I'm asking that is because we've had 4 people killed, but so far I haven't seen any charges brought against anyone of that seriousness. There's been some trespassing charges, some federal charges, but I haven't seen any federal murder charges on any indictments. And
well, these investigations are going to take a long time, I think, and they got to get presented to the grand jury with all the facts, and then the grand juries will come down with the indictments. So I think that we're going to have a few more weeks to wait for those things to happen. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I agree with you. This was not a well-planned event that these folks became engaged in.
No, it was a mob. It was a riot. It wasn't planned at all. It was.
Well, that's right. Well, I don't know if it was planned or not. I mean, according to some reports, there were tours of some of those people that were in there, conducted by various members of Congress the day before the event, and also in at least one case, or maybe more, some panic button alarm systems were disengaged that the members of Congress would use. So there were some activities going on within the body of the Congress of the United States that seemed to be functioning in a conspiratorial manner along with these folks. So there must have been some planning by some of the members of the mob. Certainly, maybe not all of them, but some of them that were there for the specific purpose of disrupting the Electoral College vote count.
Well,
I mean,
they were actually looking for the votes in one clip that I saw. Ask where's the votes? Where are they? So they could take them.
exactly.
But I mean, as I said, a mob. But when you think of some of our the people that we trust to lead this country in a democratic fashion, being in conspirators to some of these rioters, how disconcerting is that?
Well, I think Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, talked about this that there's going to be investigations held, and she said that the consequences to the members of Congress that participated in this in any way are going to go beyond Congress, meaning that the Justice Department are going to be levying any charges that are necessary to be brought, and they will be prosecuted in the criminal justice system, just like anybody else, if they were engaged in this kind of activity.
Yeah, I think that might be a little easier said than done when you consider what happened with the Russian hoax and the COVID that was supposed to be gone after 15 deaths. I mean, we've certainly seen that they know how to bury information. But what are when you look at Biden's cabinet, a lot of diversity. You see Kamala Harris, resigned this morning, and Governor Newsom gave us our first Latino senator. What is your thoughts about the people that Biden has picked for his cabinet?
Well, I've done a little research on that, and whereas 45 seemed to normalize white male domination within his cabinet, now Biden seems to be normalizing diversity throughout, with many women and many people of color. None of his picks appear to be what I call kleptocrats, or people who are just stealing everything they can from the government or from the job they're in, or kakistocrats, which means people who come from the worst segment of our society. The vast majority appear to be highly competent and knowledgeable in their areas of responsibility, and their titles appear to match up with their expertise. And they seem to be willing and able to serve the people, to respect the Constitution, and not serve themselves or just President Biden. Now, I've got a whole list of cabinet people here. I don't want to take a lot of time and go through the whole list, but there are some fabulous choices here. And I think probably you and I would both be interested in this Secretary of the VA. Now that is one of them that is a little bit controversial, because at least there's one veterans organization that is against it, because they believe that he's not a veteran, and apparently the only other non-veteran we've had heading up the VA was Dr. Shulkin, who was replaced by the current VA administrator. But at least Dr. Shulkin was a doctor. He was a physician. And so that would give him the ability to manage competently at least the Veterans Health Administration, the VHA. The man that they're putting in there now seems to have been in highly responsible staff positions in both Congress and as well as the Obama White House. So he's no doubt a very competent individual and knows his way around within the government. But the fact that he's not a veteran, doesn't have military experience, might not be received well by some of the veterans service organizations. And so he may have a sort of a tumultuous time getting confirmed by the Senate and actually doing his job once he gets in. But all of the rest of the picks, as far as I can tell, are spot on in terms of their qualifications and ability to get the job done and to serve the country.
Yeah, I definitely think that Biden might reconsider his pick for the VA, and it's not because I consider the man incompetent or anything like that. Because as you say, he is a physician, so he is definitely qualified to handle health services. But just for expediency and for the way things have been going on in the VA recently, he might reconsider that pick. But we'll see. Biden's set some very lofty goals for his first 10 days and his first 100 days. What would you consider a success for President-elect Biden within his first 100 days?
Well, I think the very first thing he has to do is reverse all those executive orders that 45 put in place, and that shouldn't take long. That's just an administrative procedure, just to negate them. And but the tough thing during the first 100 days is going to be getting a lot of legislation through Congress, but he'll have both houses, and so he should be able to accomplish a lot. Now, obviously, the biggest threat to the planet, as well as to everybody on the planet, including people that live in the United States, is the climate change. And so we have to get our arms around that. Now, there's a Green New Deal has been proposed, so we have to get that going. We've got to get everybody employed, and of course he has plans already that he's publicized about how to get 100 million people or something like that employed, or is it 10 million?
Anyway, 100 million vaccinated, and I think it was 10 million employed doing jobs related to that vaccination.
Exactly. And now I think those things are doable. If you look at the clean energy jobs that are out there to be done, there's way more clean energy jobs available than there are dirty energy jobs. But we just have to get our economy converted from one to the other to get all those jobs created. And so it's very easy to do, to put that many people to work. And we just heard Dr. Fauci reiterate recently that it's very doable to do a million 1 million vaccinations a day for each of the first 100 days. And so I expect that to happen. And also, he has to use the Defense Purchasing Act to accelerate the supply. That's where the big problem is going to be. And also, they need to learn how to mobilize people that can give those shots. I mean, these people don't have to be registered nurses that give the shots. I mean, you being in the military, I mean, you had all kinds of low-ranking enlisted people giving you shots in there. It doesn't take a genius to give those shots. So you get people trained up and get them out there on the line, giving those shots. And it doesn't take long. You just have to have the desire and the will to do it. But there's an organization called the Center for Popular Democracy that's dedicated to holding the Biden administration accountable to the issues that matter most to our communities. And this means securing progressive wins like raising the minimum wage, health care for everyone, rent and eviction relief, strengthening our right to vote, and moving policies at all levels of our government to dismantle structural racism in our country. So all of these things have to be attended to, and we have to be aware that 60% of our population is one disaster away from homelessness, and so he needs to be aware of that. Maybe we need something like universal basic income to just so that people have some kind of floor or some kind of security blanket underneath them, so that if they fall, there's a net to catch them. And but like you say, we need to get everybody employed. And but in any case, nobody in this nation should live in poverty. Nobody in this nation should be homeless. And so housing should be considered a human right, just like healthcare should be considered a human right. Good nutrition should be considered a human right. People in the United States should not have to worry about where they're going to get their next meal or where they're going to lay their head for the night. So these are issues, very challenging issues, that need to be addressed. And one thing that we all need to learn how to do in this nation, and I hope that the Biden administration can lead all of us in doing this, we need to compete less and cooperate more. And you look at all the cheating that's going on in the world. Well, a lot of that cheating is prompted by the very high stress competition that's going on in the kind of economy we have in this nation. People wouldn't cheat if they didn't feel like they absolutely had to win. So the culture that we live in is like win at all costs, and we need to get away from that culture. We need to cultivate compassion. Compassion for every one of our fellow Americans and fellow human beings on the planet, wherever they are. We need to feel compassionate toward them and do what we can to help. And I hope that the Biden-Harris administration can get us to thinking in those terms, and by doing so, maybe we can stop this internecine rivalry that's going on all the time between us as individuals. We don't need to be rivals against each other or competitors. We need to learn how to cooperate and work together as a team. We've all got our individual talents and skills that we can bring to bear on what needs to get done, and we need to just encourage each other to do that and to support each other in their efforts to do it.
Well, thank you so much, Larry. I really enjoyed talking with you tonight, and I hope we can continue these conversations, and I look forward to talking with you again. You want to give us your final thoughts for the evening, my brother?
Well, it's great to be with you via this medium, and I hope we can do it again soon, and as long as my schedule allows it, I'll try to get with you.
Thank you so much, Larry. I appreciate you. Have a good night, my man. And as
Be
always,
healthy.
welcome home.
Thank you.
All right, my brother. You have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye. That was Mr. Larry Holman, fellow Vietnam veteran and very good friend of the show. Right now, we have come down to our San Diego Black Panther hour, half hour, however long it takes. We have Brother Ward Williams and Brother Ross Galloway once again on the show. So, Brother Williams, can I start with you tonight?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, go right ahead, brother James. Uh,
The very first thing that I want to address is this COVID-19 vaccines. We have two of them, predominantly out here in California, the Moderna and the Pfizer. Um, can you kind of speak to me about uh, the readability of these vaccines and mistrust within our community?
well, one of the things I want to say in regards to mistrust, and see, I feel like a lot of this honestly just goes right into the hand of what just takes place through social media. Especially in the times of just dealing with all of the hype and things that was placed around the misconception of this whole 5G. The idea behind a 5G technology, which basically just means the fifth generation technology, some kind of way grew and became this monstrous head in a conspiracy into its own. And that was coupled with the idea that there is some type of tracking mechanism inside of the vaccine, and people ran with that. Now I'm gonna say first and foremost, speaking as an individual, so much more than by as a Panther member, I'm not a advocate for overall concept of vaccines simply because of some of the aspects that as Black people have been exposed to, going back to like the Tuskegee experiment. But at the same time, I am not one to buy into a lot of the super crazy conspiracies. Like I said, that there are nanotechnology embedded within the vaccine, and they're tracking people, and they're going to make us all Manchurian candidates. And I just think a lot of times people, because of their lack of having, and I hate to say it, but having a decent grasp on academics and a decent grasp on being able to do your own research, they run with the first answer. And oftentimes through social media, people have these instantaneous results that they expect to have. So when you pop something up in your search engine based on algorithms, oftentimes these algorithms are based on the type of things that you usually look for. So if you usually look for conspiracy theory information and fringe information, and then you go into your search engines and then you ask for something, it may very well bring up, when you're trying to look up legitimate information, it may very well bring up the type of things that you normally associate your searches with. And from that standpoint, now what you're looking at is you're looking at these crazy conspiracies. And so there's a natural distrust, for one, because the Black community has been taken for granted and has been experimented on, going up to modern times in the past, as well as that, and you have the crazy conspiracies. So those things coupled together, and then I just lack a general trust of the system. So those things together create positions to where people are fearful of vaccines. And so I get it. But at the same time, I just think we do need to be practical, especially the older generation. I do question whether or not this vaccine, how it's going to do on the children of those that get the vaccine, because there is some certain things that they, because it had to be expedited, that there are certain aspects of trials that we just don't know. But do I think that there was an ill intent? No, I don't. I don't think there's any ill intent behind the vaccine. I just think that we are potentially dealing with something that we just don't fully know the results and the repercussions of it, especially dealing with an RNA type vaccine, which is the first of its kind released here in the United States. Um, but healthcare workers are starting to get it, and people are starting to get it, and I just feel like at this point, I'm not going to be one to promote not getting the vaccine. But at the same time, I just want to say we must be cautious, and we must do our due diligence. And as a tasty treat for that conversation there, I happen to have got diagnosed with COVID-19 last Sunday. So I tested positive, but luckily for me, the only side effect that I had was a little body aches, and I experienced that for like 2 days. Fortunately, I didn't have any fever. I didn't have any issue with breathing or anything like that. So I'm actually still under my 14-day quarantine as I speak.
Okay. I know at the VA we do have the Moderna vaccine, and it has been given to the healthcare workers up there. And now that they've kind of mandated it for people over 65, I think I'm a little further up on the list. But I do have some pre-existing conditions, so But as you said, there I had some concerns, but I did do my research, and I made the conscious decision on whether or not I'm going to take the vaccine, and that'll be that.
Hmm.
But I was, just wondering how things are taken within our community, as you said, going back, to the experimentations on black patients, and it's not the first time that we've heard it. And as you say, now people are, into the movies and the nanotechnology, and not to say that it doesn't exist, but I don't know if it exists at that sophisticated of a level. Um, Another thing I wanted to talk about was the effect of social media. We have finally seen 45 get kicked off of most of his social media platforms. How do you feel about this? Do you feel that if they perhaps uh, let's see, how do I want to put this? If they restrict his freedom of speech, do you feel that the next freedom of speech that they come for is political organizations?
Yes, I do. In fact, this is one of the conversations. In that same vein, I had a conversation before, the where I was explaining something to people, and they were kind of shocked that the Panther Party would feel this way. And what it was is I made a statement that I don't agree that the neo Nazis and Ku Klux Klan's accounts should be shut down. And the reason why I said that was because when you deal with whether it be any type of political extremism, whether it be left, right, or indifferent, when you start going after certain political views, or certain religious views, or certain views, period, on a whole, and especially understanding that even today, with all of this stuff going on, what I do find to be peculiar is that I want to say it was a couple of weeks ago, the FBI still considered the greatest threat to be black extremists. After all of this that we're going through, they're still considered black people to be the most concerned thing to deal with, as far as at least what the FBI continues to put out. But knowing that is goes right back to the fact that what I'm getting at is that if you decide to speak up in this country, and at any given time you have a viewpoint that can consider to be extreme, regardless of whether it's an extreme for any particular group, or in a certain direction from political action, you will find yourself to be targeted. And so from that standpoint, I feel like, if they come from them in the morning, they'll come from me in the afternoon or the evening. And so I feel like oftentimes we all can get potentially put up in that same area and that same conversation, as well as typically the way laws are written, it's usually a net. So they catch and they put everything within that same framework. So I'm not naive to think that they would be real selective in terms of one parameter or the other. Once you open the floodgates and you give that certain level of control, it will affect whoever they decide that they want to affect. And so it's typically a shotgun approach that's going to be wielded, And me being a part of the San Diego Black Panther Party, I understand that just from historical factors that we've dealt with in the past, that we know that, like I said, dealing with Black identity extremists, we get it. We understand that when it comes to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and the power of the corporate social media entities in terms of being able to wield that level of power. Again, we give it to them to a certain degree, obviously, just the way we are with Facebook and other platforms on social media. Then we have to be careful. We have to recognize this is what we're allowing them to do. So if they have the ability to suppress the president's speech at will, and then the American government goes along with it, and the people go along with it, given I can't say I don't understand why, obviously, because we're dealing with a fool, but at the same time, even a fool should be entitled to his speech to that degree, because once we start suppressing one, then again it's a snowball effect, and I don't think there's no way of getting around that.
And my final question before I turn it over to you and Brother Rob, we see white supremacists carrying Confederate flags in the Capitol building with impunity. You see, when they had the Trump rally, they pulled down Black Lives Matters off of predominantly black churches and burned them. But yet and still, when the Black Lives Matter protest was cleaned out, more or less run over to take a photo out. Your thoughts on the double standards of social media?
Well, see, that goes right back into what I was getting at, even dealing with the who is still considered the greatest threat. And from that standpoint, yes, there is a double standard. And what I do like about the exposure here is that it's been kind of been made uh, blank, just basically opened, that now people are seeing, more and more people are seeing that it's a double standard, and there's no covering that up at this point. And so from that standpoint, even dealing with what happened there, we have to recognize that what you're dealing with is elements of power and elements within the law enforcement community who had to do with this. And this is just basically the good old boy system, and the good old boys that made this possible. Starting from President Trump on down to certain law enforcements that were at the Capitol and operated within the Capitol. And see, I call there's a term that I like to use when we talk about this situation, and it's called controlled chaos. The thing about controlled chaos is it's basically only considered chaotic because most of us don't have the ability to actually zoom out to see the bigger picture, to see exactly what's been going on. But by no means was this just some fly by night event. And even though it may appear to be that way, the type of things the type of operation that got pulled off couldn't have got done unless there were certain people behind the scenes that aided, certain people that allowed security to be slacked off, and just again, dealing with the law enforcement and the intelligence community. There's no way that the intelligence community did not know what was going to be happening by the minute. If you think that they didn't have drones up in the air, you're a fool. If you don't think that the intelligence community was not monitoring the phone receptions, then you're a fool. At the same time, there has been a reason why this was allowed to be taken care of the way it was. But what I do want to say, even in regards to that, what I don't want the people to play into is the fear mongering of dealing with what the Proud Boys represent. So there's one element of this that, like you said, is dealing with a double standard. We get it. As Black people and people of color, period, I do want to say that I just challenge us to be more diligent and more vigilant in fighting in the community and fighting oppression. I think we need to do more in terms of working across the racial barriers to get more of our white counterparts to take action against these type of just blatant um, racist acts and just double standards and speak out on it. This just gives us an opportunity to be able to get better fair trials, to get treated better, and to attack and challenge the system, to attack the injustice and challenge the system more with more aggression and more firmly, and to recognize the strength in numbers as well. One thing I do want to say is, what if nothing else, what took place will show you is that there is power in numbers. There is power in unity, and there is power in pulling together and taking a stand. And that's what I do like to deal with from that standpoint, is that if we could just only recognize the power we have when we all unite and we come together, we can make a change. Because as it has to do with the government, period, we're dealing with ideas. When we talk about a republic, we're talking about basically ideas and written words that go into law. Everything is subject to be able to be changed and modified, but it takes the will of the people to want to deal with that, and it takes the will of the people to uh, um, to hold the system accountable to fair and equal use of the law and interpretation of the law. So we have to just do our part and not fall into the what I say the reactionary mode of basically, hey, they getting away with this. Why are you letting them get away with this? This not fair. No, what we should be saying is, hell, when it comes time to deal with us, then we want better treatment. It's not that I want them to be treated like we were treated. I want us to be treated better. So we can't, we can't see one wrong act and then base that on being the standard. In other words, if I'm done wrong and I'm given unfair sentences, then I want the same thing to be done to someone else. No, what I want to recognize and what I want our people to do is recognize that our sentences have been unfair. And so from that standpoint, we must stand up. We must actually, I encourage people, even from the standpoint of recognizing that the average Black person or person of color, a lot of times don't even want to go to jury duty. We try to find reasons to get out of jury duty. So some of the stuff we tend to do to ourselves. Well, now is the time to get on those juries. Now is the time for us to take more of a stand. Now is the time for us to demand better and equal treatment across the board. But it's not going to happen unless we demand it. So we don't sit back and complain that they are getting off easy, but yet we're not standing up for ourselves to the level we need to make sure we get fair treatment. So when you see the double standard, then you have to hold it accountable and you have to continue to fight harder. And so that's my thing. I believe we should fight harder and take this as a lesson that, yeah, something definitely needs to be done. Something is definitely wrong about the system, and let's unify around that and demand equal treatment in the law.
Well, Brother Robert, I'm going to turn the show over to you and Brother Ross for the next 20, 25 minutes or so. Uh, Again, you can tell us what's on the agenda, what's happening within the Black community, or any other topics you wish to discuss.
All right, brother Ross, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Well, let me just start off by saying, and I kind of want to just keep on the same vein of what we're talking about. I just want to delve a little bit more into the concept of just victimization and the fact that the people, I've seen a lot of literature lately that, through social media and things are going around where basically what's been advertised that there's certain types of attacks that's going to potentially take place over this week that's going to be targeted the Black community. And one of the things that I want to talk about as it applies to that is that we cannot allow ourselves to be consumed by fear. You know, I keep hearing this. One of the things I keep hearing thrown out there as if it's really going to happen is a race war and a civil war. And what I want the people to do is to draw the perspective back on the climate that was taking place in the 1950s and 60s. The United States was a segregated society back then. The United States was in a position where, you know, black folks and white folks could not intermingle. The United States was in a position where we were just coming out of the Jim Crow area. There was a lot more going on at that point in time. And then when you talk about the assassination of our leaders, and then you talk about the rise of the Black Panther Party and the rise of the Nation of Islam and the rise of a lot of some of our prestigious organizations, if there was going to be a time to where there were going to take a racial war in this country, it would have been then. I see the events that are taking place here recently do not to me compare to what happened back then. Now, mind you, yes, the United States Capitol did not get stormed back then, but who stormed the Capitol? And from what direction did the call to action come from? So what we're talking about there is you're talking about a situation that happened internally, you know, and Malcolm X would call this one of those scenarios where the chickens come home to roost. This don't necessarily, it's not a black and white thing. Now, what it could be is you are dealing with elements of racism and you're dealing with elements of organizations. I wouldn't even want to call them organizations, but I would call them French political groups like the Proud Boys that are at the helm of some of this stuff. But mind you, they are being used as pawns. And that's why I go into the concept of dealing with talking about controlled chaos in the first place. Another one of the terminology I like to deal with is what I call constructed opposition scenario target. This is the creation of drawing out or targeting resistive forces by way of the enemy channeling them or channeling would-be combatants prematurely into battle to engineer a conflict to keep the real resistance from ever perpetually growing. And from that standpoint, this is what we're dealing with versus an actual race war or an actual civil war. So I do not see the United States at nowhere near being close to an actual civil war. I do see what at the mentality, and I can see how that can feel like that's the case in the air, but it ain't. Things have to get a lot more worse than what they are now. And I do just want to give my piece on that, just as a reference point of us moving forward on anything else. Brother Rossi, you have something you want to add on that?
Yeah, I want to add on to that. I want to just touch all bases from the presidency to the virus to the United States. Period. You know, I'm 36. You know, I'm pretty new to the game. You know, I got a lot of information from my grandfather and a lot of veterans and elder men. But you know, we all know the United States is a system. You know, and the way I look at it is that you know, they built their system to make the minority and the black, you know, to be at the bottom or to fail. But what I look at it right now is kind of backfiring on them. You know, just like what they put in the Planned Parenthoods in the black community for women to have abortions and try to depopulate the black race and the minority race. But that backfired on them because if you look at the statistics, 65% of white women were having more abortions than blacks and minority women. And the reason why is that because whites, you know, they're more, you know, about finances and being established, you know, so they feel like that they're taking away from their finances. So that's one strike on them, you know, that they're not producing as many as blacks and other minorities. And then two, with and then Trump's second year in office, where he had to put a state of emergency on the opiates in the medical field, with the prescriptions, with the oxycontins, the Roxys, and the Percocets. Because in Maine, Virginia, and a lot of places on the East Coast, a lot of whites were ODing on the opiates. They made the opiates for the blacks, because in the black community, we did a lot of crack and heroin, and that backfired on them. So like how they say, with that we're the minority, but in reality, we're not the minority. That they're the minority, and I just look at it, with the COVID and with everything, I think that's just for them to. I think they put that out there, just to have everything on a standstill, so they can find a new system, because their system is failing. And like this fight that's going on that happened at the Capitol. That's not our fight. That's a white man's fight, and what we got to do is let them fight and let them fail, and we got to build ourselves up by building ourselves up and building the community up, and like I say, make our own politics, look out for our own community, and build in our own community. But I think what's going on with these whites and these white supremacists, I think they're just living in fear, because their day is numbered, their system is failing, and they're the minority. And then you gotta realize too, in politics now, you have blacks, you have Indians, Asians in politics now. I know when I was young, in about the early '90s, I see majority white people in politics. Now you have every other race in politics now, and that's a sign of them losing power also. But I just want to tell my black community, protect yourself, protect your kids, live right. Like I say, don't get caught up into social media. If you just like Brother James said, if you're not for sure about the vaccine, you want to know more about it, research it. You can't believe everything you see on social media. It's good to hear, it's good to see stuff on social media, but do your research on stuff, so you have a sound mind. Yes, sir.
Brother Ross, I kind of want to disagree with you on one thing that you said there when you said it's the white man's fight. And the reason why I say that is because when you look back in history, the Indians said the same thing.
Mhm.
So they introduced smallpox. When you start talking about it being a fight, eventually when one enemy is defeated, you turn toward the next in line. Are you afraid of those repercussions?
Yes. See like when I'm talking about the fight, this is a white on white crime. You know what I'm saying? You gotta realize this. In the Capitol building, if you looked in the crowd and you heard about the people that got arrested, yeah, you have military, ex-military, you have some police, you have politicians. So this is their fight, because they're losing control, and they know their system is failing. But us as blacks, we always had to fight. But the main thing that we need to fight for, and like I tell everybody, we need to quit depending on these politicians to change our lives. To change our lifestyle, to give us more money, to bless our families. We have to do that ourselves, because like I said, America has a system. The system has always been put in for the black man to be last. So we can't go with this system. We can't have faith in these politicians anymore. We had to do it ourselves. And that's our fight. When it comes to politics and the politicians, we don't have enough power to intervene in those fights and debates. All we could do is vote. You know what I'm saying? And wish on a prayer. But what we can do is go to our neighbor, You know what I'm saying? Introduce ourselves, spread the love, have town meetings at somebody's house on how to build up the community, how to get rid of gang violence. If Mother Williams is losing her home, let's contribute and help her keep her house, because just stuff like that.
Well, let me jump in real quick, James, and do speak a little bit on that. Because what I emphasize us recognizing our power, our political power, political might. And by saying that, what I mean is that when Ross say don't depend on those politicians, then we're talking about the generalized career politician. But what we must do is, even going back to the concept of the symbology of what the Black Panther Party stood for. The idea of the Panther symbol itself was basically to give our Black people and our oppressed population a symbol that would let them know which people would actually have something, when it comes to the political system, or the candidates actually have something in place that would be for the benefit of our people. Because we were dealing with areas like Laos County, Alabama. We're dealing with an area that was over 80% Black, but ran purely by the white establishment. So from that standpoint, us as Black people, we have to put our elected officials in office. We have to prop up people that we want to run and represent us. We can't continue to go for those that are already in that caliber, already operating on that caliber, and are placed there for us. Because from that standpoint, then yeah, all we're talking about doing is voting for the lesser of two evils. We can't continue to operate from that perspective. But see, that goes right back into the idea of victimization. When we don't recognize our power, and that's what I'm saying, take away from this whole capitalist situation, is recognizing the power of the people. What we're talking about and what we're witnessing is what I would call a Custer's last stand. And what we're talking about from that standpoint is what Trump represented: a polarity of the United States. His whole campaign, his whole way of operation is based on drawing distinction and drawing people against each other for the sake of being able to allow people to get caught up in fighting each other, which is a conquer and divide mentality, so that he can continue to push things through and raise up the corporate structure and raise up certain types of things that will benefit the corporation. Trump just completely ignored what was going on in terms of how certain things are damaging the ecosystem. I mean, the bottom line. I mean, he fought to get pipelines and stuff passed through and pushed through Native American areas and reservations. I mean, it's basically his whole game plan was to thrust the corporate structure and to polarize the people and turn us against each other as a people. And from that standpoint, coming off of the back of Barack Obama, you had a population of just flat out face it, white folks that just did not like the way things were, the face of the American politics. Because mind you, Obama was Black, but the politics itself was still running the same way. But the face of it was Black. And so that angered America enough to where we was willing to deal with a president that just basically that operated from the opposite perspective. So whereas Obama pulled people together and just through the symbology of having a Black man in that position of office, brought more people to being able to look at each other as American people versus Black or white. Whereas Trump comes in and he completely reverses the scenario and throws out there "Make America Great Again," which is reflecting on the time of segregation. So from that standpoint, we are talking about a person who plays into the dynamic of polarizing and pinning Black against white, uh, a minority against majority, rich against poor, you name it. Any type of stereotypical thing you can do, he was creating a scenario to polarize that position. And by doing so, it keeps the people at each other's throats, and it allows those people that are the corporate elite to play the game that they play, because everybody's too busy fighting each other to be able to see what's the real deal going on. And we can't allow ourselves to fall victim to that type of mentality. So from that standpoint, yeah, I agree, James. We do have a fight in this, but what we have to be diligent about is that, if anything, what it should show us is that we need to be more involved in the aspect of governing itself. Politics is everything. Everything is politics. When we narrow-mindedly only look at politics as being a vote, then we are missing the big picture. We are missing the whole aspect of what it means to be in control of our own destiny as a people. So I do want to emphasize the fact that we need to be more active in the political system, but we have to, obviously, we have better results placing more of an interest in that on a localized level. That's my spiel on that, James.
Brother Robert, weren't these the basic premises taught by Huey and Bobby Seals and our forefathers? Why are we still caught up in these ancient arguments?
I think we're still caught up in ancient arguments because what we're dealing with, and more so now, keep in mind, in the 60s, we were dealing with a time where Black folks were fighting to be able to actually have access to higher education. Unfortunately, that dynamic has changed. That dynamic has changed now to where certain things we take for granted. As a result of taking certain things for granted, we have also taken for granted our rights. We have taken for granted the exchange for freedom, for civil liberties. A lot of the younger generation is disconnected with the idealism of what it actually meant to fight for either human rights or civil rights. A lot of people don't even really understand the difference between civil rights and human rights. Because, mind you, it wasn't until Martin Luther King was, dealing with his day to day, really started speaking on the Vietnam War and getting involved in global politics, that he became the threat that he had to be assassinated. They assassinated him when he decided to mingle in global politics, when he started addressing things from the perspective of human rights versus civil rights. The same thing with Malcolm X. Once Malcolm X went to Mecca, once Malcolm X started recognizing that it's not just the white man is the devil, but what we're looking at a systematic and systemic concept of racism that is holding back and that is targeting the world from a global standpoint. Now, all of a sudden, then you get the bigger picture. When you get the bigger picture, then he has to be assassinated. Fred Hampton Jr., in terms of why he got assassinated, keep in mind, within the ranks of the Black Panther Party, him and people like him and Bunchy Carter, they were able to organize across racial lines. They were able to organize across the street tribes. They were able to organize people who you would have never thought would associate with the Black struggle. They had to assassinate him for that. So when we're talking about unification, and when we're talking about bringing the people together, keep in mind, especially through modern day COINTEL, counterintelligence. Mind you, the idea of counterintelligence is to counter your ability to think and process critical information and to be a critical thinker. That still stands true to this day. So you have a lot of misconceptions that constantly reseed themselves and grow new legs and a new way of attacking a new generation with the same old tactics. It's like the Willie Lynch syndrome. We're talking about something that was established back in slavery, but it still stands true to this day. When you find ways to pin people against each other, which is again a divide and conquer strategy, it continuously works. It works because when we're not
I can't
politicized
hear you,
as a
brothers.
people, when we're not politicized as a people, then what
You log
happens?
off and log back on.
Okay, can you hear me, James?
Yes.
Okay, when we're not politicized as a people, then we fall victim very easy to these types of misconceptions. when we take academics and we take our education for granted, and we are not just students of learning, period, then it is very easy for us to fall for stereotypical storylines that basically just, change the name but not change the concept generation after generation.
Any thoughts on that, Brother Ross?
I missed part of that. The volume had muted on me. I had to log off and log back on. It froze up on me.
Basically, well, Brother Williams, you want to explain to him what we were talking about there for those few seconds?
What basically, why do we find ourselves having the same discussions and the same arguments in terms of our lack of understanding the political system and lack of understanding what's really going on in terms of the struggle? Again, going back to the fact that the Black Panther Party was founded on getting our people to recognize the power that we have within this political system if we all come together and make change, and we put into office our own political figures, and we put into office our own systems of government. This even goes back to what was happening in South Africa with the apartheid and Nelson Mandela and him, being locked up for over 26 years. The deal is, from that standpoint, is when we allow a minority from that standpoint to control the dynamics of everything that is going on. And we're talking about from that standpoint, we're talking about a worldwide conflict. Because keep in mind, bottom line, the masses of resources, of wealth resources on this planet is controlled and operated by the hands of a very small percentage of people. So from that standpoint, everybody, black, white, indifferent, becomes part of the game. Everybody becomes part of the problem. Everybody gets caught up in this game of the division, and this game of pinning us against each other and keep us infighting and fighting over crumbs and scraps, while they own the mass majority of the situation. And that's what we have to recognize. We have to recognize why I'm fighting over the crumb and they got the whole loaf.
Yeah.
What's really going on? You see what I mean? And so that's part of the dynamic that we're talking about, is that they got us blinded by the realization that the majority of making this place a better world is in the power and in the hands of the people. This is why the Black Panther Party would say all power to the people, but the people themselves have to recognize how to utilize that power. And part of that comes from us being students of politics, being students of education, and being lifelong students of wanting to learn beyond what we get caught up in learning, from the standpoint of if it's not tied into a dollar that puts food on the table, then we don't want to know it. And keep in mind that that's the whole game of politics in the first place. We can take that all the way back to the Romans, the Greeks and the Romans, in terms of the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games, mind y'all, was developed so that the people would not focus on the politics and the ruling class. So what they did is they created a game of the people that they were persecuting. And when they put the people in death matches against one another, then all of a sudden it was okay that the people were being the people that were put into these games were being crucified by the governments. It was okay that people find themselves less associated with how politics and how things are actually being governed, because they created entertainment.
Yeah.
That same model still happens to this day. And so from that standpoint, we continue to find ourselves victim by the same weaponized concept over and over again, because we as a people are not being students of history. We didn't pay attention back during the Roman and Greek games. We're not paying attention now when it comes to how our hip hop music has been stolen from us, and it's all about shaking booty, and it's all about bling bling, and it's all about how much you can blow and how much of a consumer you can be. And when they keep us in that form of ignorance, when they keep us in a below sixth grade level of education in terms of us being critical thinkers, then, James, we will continue time and time again having this discussion.
Brother Ross, your final thoughts
Oh
for tonight.
yeah. Well, yeah, I agree with Brother War, and like my thoughts on that is that's true. What we need to do, man, is like I say, we have to unite. That's the main thing. Because like I say, blacks, we came a long way. Financially, you have a lot of black successful black men and women nowadays. The only thing that's killing us is the unity. And what we have to do is that we have to be more educated on what's going on in the world instead of paying attention to the news and the media, because a lot of that stuff is smoke screens. You know, for the first 2 years Trump was in office, the thing they really talked about was that wall and how he cheated on the ballots with Hillary Clinton. In his last two, you know, saying this, then then now it's all about the him being him being racist and COVID-19. You know, we can't focus on that all the time, because a lot of times that stuff is lies and it's smoke screens, and the media they add on to it. They add extras information to it that's not true. But like I say, the main thing that we have to do, man, is like I say, we just have to unite. You know, we have to unite, but like Brother Ward said, we had to get involved in politics. You know, we had to get involved with our city politics, our local mayor, our local police. You know, we had to get involved into those small politics to see some type of change in our community. You know, and that's how I want to end it.
Uh, as always, Brother War, it's fascinating to get the Panthers' point of view, and especially educating our young brothers and sisters. I want to thank you guys for coming out this Monday evening and taking the time to educate some of us and kind of reinforce the ideas of some of the rest of us. So I want to thank you very much, Brother War. You have any final thoughts for the evening?
Yeah, I just want to everyone to, just from the standpoint of this inauguration day that's coming forward, just look at the climate, look at what's going on with the National Guard being put in place, and a lot of people are looking at the modern times as being something that is sad. They become saddened about, but I want to look at it from the standpoint of what's happening is we're seeing history being made. We're living in the times to where it is definitely a turning point for the way life is headed, and it gives us plenty of opportunity to make change. So where there's adversity comes change, comes progress. And so people, what we have to recognize is that nothing of any significance or importance come by way of leisure. Realize that. The whole idea is to arise to the occasion, arise to the situation, and do your part to be active in this change. So I challenge everyone to look at this situation, from not from the eyes of a victim. Look at it from the eyes of someone who needs to put themselves in a position of empowerment. This is a good time to live in. And so, from that standpoint, people, let's rise to the occasion. Let's make tomorrow a better place for our children. And with that being said, I just want to say all power to the people.
Thank you, Brother Ross, and thank you, Brother Robert. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. And as for our audience, we thank you for your participation, and we look forward to having you again next week, right here on the Political Consciousness of West Coast Steeler Fan. And as always, it'll be dedicated to an imperfect union. Have a great Monday, everyone. A great week. Be safe and we look forward to talking to you next week. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.